Hi, everybody. I'm John Niehaus, Director of Program Development for the National Association of Flight Instructors, and I'd like to welcome you to this edition of the NAFI Briefing Room. Today's topic is new flight instructors, just gauging the trials and tribulations of being new in the profession, because some of us have forgotten what that's like. So with me today, I've got Joe Rucinski from Kansas City, Missouri. I have Peter Amato, and Peter is from Boston, Massachusetts. And I have Jakob Harris from Portland, Maine. Guys, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hi.
Absolutely. Now, Jakob, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So I just started instructing in November of last year. So it's been about 6-ish months. I have about 130 hours of instructing. I instruct part of a flight club / freelance type thing. So airplane single engine instrument. If people have their own plane, they just want to get used to a new plane, or in our 172 that we fly, I do instruction in that. I have a bunch of students who actually just bought their own planes, so I'm teaching them in that, moving them from our plane to theirs. But it's been an interesting time. I've learned a lot. I hope they've learned a lot. And it's been a fun time. So
that's awesome. It sounds like you're pretty busy.
Oh yeah.
Peter, you're up next.
Yeah, my name's Peter Amato. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I got my CFI on February 12th, so about a month and a half ago. I already have about 103 hours of dual given. It's been a crazy month. I work at East Coast Aero Club at Bedford at Hanscom Field. And I have a full range of students, from people who want to be airline pilots for a career, people who just want to do this for fun as a hobby. And I really like it. I instruct in the Cessna 172, the Piper Warrior, Piper Archer, and the Piper Tomahawk as well. So that's a little bit about me.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
How about you, Joe?
My name is Joe Rucinski, and I got my CFI back in October of 2020. I have about 500 hours of total time with 100 hours of dual given. I mainly flight instruct out of a Cessna 150 and just do private pilots. Right now, I'm just a part-time instructor, so I only take on about 2 or 3 students at a time, and also teach in a local flying club here in the Kansas City area.
That's fantastic. So, guys, I'm going to start off with the first question here. What was the driving force to make you guys decide to want to do this for a living? What made you want to become flight instructors?
Well, I actually I got my private pilot back in 1991. So there's a little bit about my age there. And I just flew for a hobby through the 90s and 2000s. I've been a police officer for 27 years. And actually, my dad was a private flight instructor. So it was always in the back of my mind. But obviously, just working in law enforcement, I really didn't have the funds to fly a lot. And then recently, just a couple of years ago, I really started flying a lot more. Got my instrument rating, my commercial rating, and just decided, it's something I've always wanted to do. I've always enjoyed just taking friends and family up as a private pilot and going over some stuff with them about flying. And then I just decided I wanted to make it official and help introduce people to the passion of flight. So.
And then you find out that there's so much more to that world once you become a flight instructor.
It has been, not only quite the learning experience, but it can be quite exhausting.
Yes.
I tell you, if my colleagues here are full-time instructors, I really, idolize them, because just doing it part-time, where I'm flying, maybe on a lesson day, just 2 or 3 hours of dual given, I'm wore out after that. These flight instructors that are working at a flight school and they're there 8 hours a day, that's quite the accomplishment.
Peter, how about you? What made you become a flight instructor?
I think it came a lot from my previous instructors, actually, and some of the things that they've taught me, and just some situations I've been in flying where you could almost hear your instructor in the back of your head. Like on that first solo, you could kind of hear your instructor's voice, like do this, do that, or on a check ride. And those instructors that really stuck and have taught me lessons that I'll probably use for the rest of my career. I wanted to do the same for some other students. And I think that resounding impact is really cool that you can have on somebody. People have had it on me. I hope I'm having it on other people. That'll be remain to be seen, but that's what got me into flight instructing.
Jakob, how about you?
Yeah, so I went to a collegiate aviation university, went through all 141, right through my commercial multi, and then COVID happened and everything. So ended up moving back to Maine. I was out in St. Louis. And at that point, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna work for my family a little bit and fly like once a month just for fun, just to get a break from all the training environments. And then when I met my boss actually to start renting a plane, he was just like, do you want to get your CFI? And I was like, well, that's been my goal. I don't know if I want to yet. And then we kind of just hit the ground running, got it within a month, did that, started working a lot. And ever since then, it's just been so much fun. It's nice having like you're feeling an impact for your students. You see them grow, and that's the best thing I've seen. So, in my case, it kind of just happened. I fell right into it, and it was awesome. So, yeah.
So, guys, as far as that first day, you find out that you've got your very first student. You're brand new. And I know in my case, I was even apprehensive to even tell the student that they were my first one, because nobody wants to find out from their doctor, oh, you're my first go. What made you all the most apprehensive about that? And let's start with Jakob this time.
Yeah, so again, I was thrown right into it. I came back from St. Louis after my check ride. After I got my COVID test back, my boss handed me this 13-year-old actually who wanted to take their first flight and see what it was like. And I was like, okay, I have to teach someone who doesn't know how to drive a car, who's very young. And I'm very happy that was my first student. Just like, it was just a fun time, and seeing how excited they were made me super excited. And I was planning on like not letting them fly a lot, like letting them fly obviously, but being like right on the controls, being like, okay, they're really young. But once my nerves came down, they were just having a great time. We both loved it. They ended up not knowing it was my first lesson until after, because that's what my boss said. But the dad who sat in the back seat, he was like, I would have never guessed. And I was like, oh, thank you. And that kind of took some weight off my shoulders. So
how did they find out?
It was my boss was just like, well, if you guys want to know, that was his first ever lesson. And they were like, oh wow, we didn't even know. And then I had 3 other students right after that. What was that?
They said your boss sold you out.
He did. But it was great. Yeah.
Joe, what about you? What made you most apprehensive?
I think I kind of beat around the bush with my first students. It was just a word of mouth. Right after I got my CFI in October, this guy reached out to me. It was a friend of a friend, and I'm not exactly sure if he knew or not. He was going to be my first student. I did tell him I was a new CFI, and then once I didn't really bring it up again after that. And then once we got him to solo, then I told him, you're my first solo. So I think he probably put 2 to 2 together that, I was really his first full-time student. And apprehension wise, I think it was just more of not so much me worried about my skill set as, one of the main points of a good student is their own self-confidence. So I didn't want them to have a lack of confidence in my teaching ability, and have that be in the back of their mind by worrying I was, their first student. They were my first student, or I was a really new instructor. So I really didn't, harp on that too much. I just, started with the syllabus, and we just went down the road, just like he was like the 100th student. That's where I just had that mindset. I was just teaching them just like anybody else.
Peter, what about you?
Interesting experience for me, actually. So my first student, we sat down for about an hour before we went flying. It was a student, my CFI, who trained me to be a CFI, did his intro flight, and then he handed him to me as a primary student. So when we were sitting down, the first couple of questions he starts asking me are like, oh, how many students have you gotten through to the private pilot? And that was kind of an interesting question to answer. I was like, I told him, I was like, hey, I'm a little bit new at this. I don't have any, but over time, he's still my student. He's a great student. I've really built his trust, I think, through flying. And I think even if you are new, you get someone a little bit apprehensive. If you go out there and you're really professional and you show you know your stuff, and I think also looking stuff up when you don't know it is really important. Because if I just rattled something off that was wrong and didn't really know what I was talking about, I think that destroys your credibility too as a CFI. So I think it's not so much about the number of students you've had; it's about how you act and how you fly.
So that's an interesting point, and I completely agree. But you hit on something there. What is a professional CFI to you guys, Peter? Since you brought it up, what's the definition?
I think it's somebody who always tries their best to be safe, to fly their best every day, flies every flight like a check ride. I also think it's somebody who admits mistakes, admits when you're wrong, and also looks things up when you don't know the answer. I think that's big because we learn about primacy so much in CFI training that if you tell somebody something wrong the first time and they trust you, like as a CFI, your student, we're their main point of contact in aviation. I mean, they trust what we say. If we say something wrong, they're going to believe us the first time because they don't know any better. And then that's what's going to be in their mind for the rest of their training.
Mm-hmm. Jakob, what about you?
Kind of going off what Peter said, I'd say transparency, being as transparent as possible, letting them know goals that you have, letting them know how they're doing, not just sugarcoating it like, oh, well, you lost a few 100 feet, but like, that wasn't that bad. It's just like, tell them exactly what needs to happen and kind of give them a chance to grow. And just kind of always, like I said, like going back to transparency, just like, always being there, always admitting if you made a mistake or admitting if you don't know something. I find myself saying, don't quote me on that 1 sec, and I'll go look it up if I forgot it, or just, it's like I'll know it in my head, but I'm just like, I want to be 100% sure with you because, you know, they're trusting what you're saying and you want to give them the right information, the correct information, and the most useful information they can use to build upon and go forward with.
What about you, Joe?
I think it's really important to try to keep the mindset that even though you're a flight instructor, they're a learner, that you work for them. You know, I continuously remind my students, say, hey, these are your lessons. You know, if you are ever frustrated or burnt out and you just want to have a fun day of flying and we just want to go up there and work on something that you really enjoy doing, tell me that. You know, we don't have to absolutely follow the syllabus per day. You know, I want to make it a fun experience for my students, and keeping that mindset that you are there to do a job that they're paying you for. And by doing that job to the best of your ability, whether it's safety, transparency, teaching them everything they need to know, you know, to be a safe pilot from here on out, you know, it's just keeping that mindset that you're here for them instead of you're not here just to collect a paycheck or to build hours. You're here to provide them the experience they're paying you to provide.
And that's huge. I mean, flight instructors have been notorious for not knowing a lot of the sort of finer points of customer service. I'm guilty of it too. I also went to a 141 university, and as Jakob can attest, I mean, there's no room for fun in a lot of cases. This is the lesson. This is what we're going to do. You better have studied, and you're going to move forward. And my first flight instructing job was a Part 61 school, kind of out in the cornfield, and most of my clients were there to have fun, to learn to fly, because that's what they always wanted to do. And here I was being the sort of 141 military drill instructor. And these guys were going, wait a second, let's tone this down a little bit, Sergeant Slaughter. Like, come on. I just want to have a little bit of fun. And it took me, I don't know, it took me months to really kind of unpack that and realize that they're paying a lot of money to, earn a objective, but if it's not fun, then what's the point?
Exactly.
So it's
Exactly.
you're learning it faster than I was able to. So that's
So I definitely see it. I have a backup flight instructor that uses my airplane to teach on the side, and she just graduated from 141. And I can definitely see a difference between my style and her style.
Mhm.
Where I've always been, just came up at my own speed, different instructors, no structured syllabus, and where she's very, like you said, very, math A, B, C, and D, and I'm like, let's take this as this goes and see how this works, kind of thing. So, but they, as with everything else, everything has its advantages and disadvantages.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I've definitely realized that going 141, I guess, yeah, I came from that background. That's what I did all my training. But first lesson with a new guy, I will always just take them out and be like, where do you live? And we'll fly over their house if they live close. We'll fly over their house. That's the first thing I like to do. Kind of get them up, get them doing their straight and level turns and everything, kind of get them used to the aircraft. Then I'll be like, okay, well, this is Richmond over here, this town that they live in. And I'm like, let's just do a little fly over your house and go back. I like to have fun. And the big thing is to kind of learn how to read your students during that day, during that lesson. Because sometimes when it's like, we have an objective, we're going to go do steep turn stalls. That's the big thing. And if they're just getting overwhelmed with it, I'll be like, okay, well, you know what? Let's go do some landings. Like you like those, let's go tighten them up. And just being able to be flexible with the lessons. I really like that, being in part 61 now. So just kind of reading the students, figuring out what's going to be best for them during that day or during that week. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I like using alternate airports too. Students like to go, especially we live on the coast here up in Boston. We can take them into somewhere like Beverly or Portsmouth, New Hampshire, have them go over to the water, really remember why they're doing this. They're not doing this to do steep turns out in the practice area or slow flight. They're doing this to have fun. So I think going to other places, showing them the fun side of aviation is really important every once in a while, especially if they're getting frustrated.
Mhm. So, as a low time instructor, how do you think that the industry sort of looks at new instructors? I know there's some misconceptions going on out there, and some people have some negative opinions. I don't think that that's necessarily, or like to believe that that's not necessarily a prevalent idea. But in your guys' experience, have you had? How do you think people view a new instructor? Peter, go ahead.
I think I'm really lucky with where I work. In my experience of where I work, everyone's been super supportive and only offering any tips or advice. People haven't ever been getting in the middle of what I've been doing. I've never been interrupted with a student or anything like that. It's been mostly very, very good where I've been working. The most senior instructors always offer us help. People who just started as well, maybe a couple months before I did, kind of shared some tips and tricks and some stories about their first few lessons too to help me out before I started. So I don't know about the industry as a whole, but at least in my kind of bubble where I work, it's been very, very supportive.
That's awesome. Joe, how about you?
I think any, insecurities or concerns that I've had about that were basically just turned out to be just unfounded. In the way of new students, they've never really questioned, my time as a flight instructor or my ability or a number of students I've had. And some of my flight reviews, like in my club, I was really the one that was more, I think, intimidated, when I'd have a 5,000 hour pilot requesting a flight review, and here I'm a brand new instructor. And they've even said, hey, you're the flight instructor, you've done the work, you've passed the test, there's a reason why they gave you, flight instructor. So, don't worry about, I've had older pilots, boost my own self-confidence about that. Like, don't worry that you're a low-time flight instructor. You have that level of knowledge that they don't have. So.
That's fantastic. Jakob.
Yeah, so it's actually, I've noticed the view of new flight instructors, it's kind of changed from where you go. So when you're at a bigger flight school, you kind of can see the stigma of the flight instructors that have been there for a few years, they're like, oh yeah, well his lessons are so short, and like, they kind of might talk down, but at the same time, that's kind of just because they know each other. They're not actually, they don't really look down at them. And then where I am now, it's been nothing but positive. Everyone's been awesome, offering me tips, offering help. Other pilots who have a few thousand hours, they'll come up and still ask you questions because they know that you're the flight instructor. They'll ask you tips for something new that came up. And I've noticed that people are just like really happy to see me grow and my students grow with me. And it's just been a great environment where I'm at.
It's one of the best things about just aviation in general. It seems that for the most part, everybody's out to just make each other better and help progress along the way. So I love those stories. That's great to hear. It's a big thing for us at NAFI, and is just helping support instructors of all experience levels, making sure that that everyone has the support network that they need to grow and achieve the things that they want to achieve. One last question before we decide to end the presentation, but what skill do you think you picked from one of your flight instructors that really kind of stuck with you and has made your abilities that much better? Something that really kind of you feel makes you stand out. Jakob, I'm going to pick on you first.
Yeah. What I always liked, I had a flight instructor I had through half my private, all my instrument, and just up until the end of my commercial. She was awesome. I like an instructor who is very easygoing, very open about your lessons. Like, this is what we need to do. This is what you need to work on. This is what you're doing great. And allowing you to fly the plane, allowing you to make mistakes, and then learning from your mistakes. So when I'm in my lessons and a student, I know they're about to do something wrong, I'll give a little hint. I'm not the type of person that takes control right away over the littlest thing. I've had instructors who do that. I don't really like that. I like the student to fly the plane, learn from their mistakes, and praise what they're doing great. It's very much a team building experience between both of us, and getting both of our confidences up. So you're getting confidence in your students, and your students' confidence is building on themselves. And that is great to see. And that is what I like to see in my students. So I'm not one to just take the controls right away if something is about to go wrong in a safe situation.
Sure. Peter, how about you?
My instructor, who actually just did my commercial multi and my CFI training, was awesome. And he always told us, don't rush. And I think that's huge for aviation. I think rushing in aviation is really dangerous. I think it can impede training. And I think a lot of students, they get in the airplane with an instructor, they're all like frazzled, kind of freaking out, and like everything's going a million miles an hour. And I try to get my students to take a deep breath and relax. There's no need to rush. Some things you need to do quickly and deliberately, but if you're doing it right, it still shouldn't be rushed. Even an engine failure checklist should not be rushed. It should be done deliberately, done the right way, and done carefully. And I think experience plays a role in that. I think knowledge plays a role in that. And I think if you have experience and knowledge, you shouldn't have to rush anything in aviation. So I'm trying to portray that to my students, something I learned from my last CFI, actually.
Joe, how about you?
I really kind of take a little bit of all three of my instructors I've had over 20 plus years. My first private pilot instructor wasn't a good match. He would yell at me, get frustrated, with the lack of progress. So of course, I really remember that these days. And, even if I do get frustrated with the students, I really, don't ever go down that road of trying to intimidate a student or yell at them or, make them feel a lack of confidence or anything like that. Then my secondary flight instructor for my private, very supportive, they're really just to kind of like teach me to get my ratings, always taught me to, be safe first. So I really instill that. But my instructor that I've had for my advanced ratings, I've had all the same person. And what I liked about him the most that I really tried to instill is, he would always instill self-confidence into me. And he would always tell me that 90% of my problem was the lack of self-confidence. I'd come home every day after, shooting approaches, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to get this. I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit. And then he'd just like, oh, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. You'll get it. It'll click. And just, he would kind of keep me coming back the next day. And, I really do that with my students. I'm constantly telling them, reassuring them that, they're doing just fine. We're here to have fun, and that everything's going to come along, and maybe we need to try a different approach or whatever. But I never, ever go down the roads of negativity, something that, like Peter mentioned, that, I see a lot is the rushing. I have like one student right now that wants to rip the wings off the plane every time we do stalls. He wants to recover so quickly. And I just have to just say, hey, we have time. You don't have to yank the controls, out of the airplane. And just trying to get the students to slow down and, and keep having fun the entire time, even though it's a learning process. And, just me remembering that the students are probably nervous, whether they have a lack of self-confidence or they're trying to impress the flight instructor. And, as a flight instructor, we're usually not nervous. We know what's going on. And it's us I'm trying to put myself in the student's seat, saying, what can I do to make them feel more confident about what's going on right now?
Well, guys, I really appreciate you taking the time for this. And I think I'm going to throw one last thing out there. Do you guys have any bits of advice for a new instructor or sort of a would-be new instructor? Anything that you think would sort of settle someone into the right seat? Any final thoughts?
I would say that during your CFI training, there's going to be a point at which you look up into the sky, you feel like you're in the middle of the woods, you feel like there's nothing to help you, and you just feel like you're just totally swamped. Just power through it. It'll get better. There will be a day where it clicks. It happened to me. There's a day where you really feel like everything comes together. You're going to have that lesson where you really transition from student to teacher. It will happen if you keep working at it. So don't get discouraged if there's that day where you really don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I say the biggest thing is, so you're at this point where you're training for your CFI. You've gone through all the training. You've gone through pretty much everything that you are about to do with your students. Reference and think back to everything that you've gone through, and on the lessons that you have with your students if you're brand new. Kind of just put yourself in the mindset of when you were a 5 to 10 hour pilot, and just like, yeah, everything comes naturally to us at this point of flying the plane, but kind of think, what were some tips that helped you back then that really got you to understand how much trim to use and when to use it and to create that perfect landing? It's all natural to you, but you have to remember, kind of talk through everything and just bring yourself back to where you were in your training. And just remember that's where the student is, and try to give them the best tips and give them the best advice that you wish you had or that you got at the point where they are. Yeah.
I would say one thing that Jakob mentioned earlier, I really like to impose on is, make sure as an instructor, you let the student fly the airplane. I don't know. I don't feel like I take over, and I clearly try to let the students make mistakes, whether it's, a little bit of a bounce or, improper stall recovery, and let them see the results of the errors before I take over, as long as it's always safe, of course. I think that's a key, is you have to really feel comfortable, letting the student push the edge of the envelope with the airplane. Another thing that I really found is for new flight instructors to really pay attention to those FOIs during your training. Just in the short 100 hours of dual given, I've probably seen every different personality there is already. And I would have guessed that. I would have just thought, well, everybody, all pilots I've talked to are kind of similar, a little bit of type A. But I mean, I've seen the hazardous attitudes and the guys who wants to show off for the instructor, or the very timid students. And you really have to be able to adapt to different personalities as a flight instructor, and still, maintain your composure, make sure everything stays safe, and adjust your teaching ability so they understand what they need to learn.
Joe, you hit a buzzword for me. I'm so glad you said FOI. Oh, that's fantastic. I know it can be sometimes not the most entertaining of reading, but I have used also the techniques from the FOI more than I ever thought that I would. And I was one that struggled to get through that book too. Just you don't realize how useful it can be until you actually start doing it.
For sure.
So guys, once again, I appreciate you taking the time tonight. You are all an inspiration to me. The energy that you guys have towards the profession, the professionalism that you have, and just the fun that you're having in the process. I think it's great. And I love the fact that you're sharing that with others. So thank you so much.